All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. With the COVID-19 surge across different nations on the European continent has raised alarm bells. France, Britain, Greece and Portugal have all reported record number of infections in just the last 24 hours. France has also reported 180,000 infections in the last 24 hours period, and this happens to be one of the highest number of infections reported by any nation worldwide. It is also the highest number of infections that have been reported in Europe since the beginning of the pandemic. Well, on the other hand, England and Wales have reported 130,000 new cases of infections, which again happens to be a record number of infections, as the Omicron mutant variant is said to be pushing up the surge. The response of the United Kingdom's 4 nations, however, continues to diverge. Authorities in London and Cardiff have announced 130,000 cases, while the devolved government in Scotland has provisionally recorded about 9,000 infections. Northern Ireland has released no new data due to the Christmas holidays, as Omicron has become the dominant strain of COVID-19 infections. Now, the number of infections that has been recorded in the United Kingdom has crossed the 100,000 mark, and Britain happens to be one among the worst nations dealing with a sharp surge due to COVID-19 infections. And also what needs to be stressed here is that many people initially had suggested that the Omicron variant causes only mild symptoms, but hospital admission rates have also been on the rise, particularly in the city of London. The hospitalization rate in the British capital has witnessed a sharp rise of 53% on a week-to-week basis. And the total death toll due to COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic in Britain has now approached the 150,000 mark. Now, following the recent rise in the number of infections, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have each introduced renewed curbs on hospitality and big social gatherings. But the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, remember he's been talking about this for the last fortnight, has decided not to impose harsh restrictions in England for the holiday seasons. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has decided against following suit in terms of what's been announced in other nations such as Scotland and Wales and also some of the other nations in mainland Europe, despite the sharp rise in the number of infections that have been reported. Now, Omicron is now the dominant variant of the coronavirus in Switzerland as well. The spread has even caused people who've got even the booster shots to succumb to this infection. A lot of people who've got the 3rd jab of the COVID-19 infection have also turned positive. And many of these guys have been admitted in hospital as well. Switzerland has one of the highest infection rates on continental Europe. More than 13,000 COVID-19 cases were recorded in the last 24 hours. And the figure is expected to reach 20,000 by January. 55% of all Swiss cases are now reported to be due to the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. All right, now to give us more updates in terms of what's actually happening on Europe and why are so many nations across Europe, despite the restrictions and despite a high rate of vaccination, why they're reporting so many infections, we are joined by our correspondent Trent Murray, who's joining us live from Berlin. Now, Trent, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this broadcast in WION. And let me begin by asking you this. We've seen Europe record a very good rate in terms of vaccinations that have been given to the people, and despite that, we are seeing a sharp rise in the number of infections. What is driving this sharp surge in the number of infections, especially in nations such as France, England, Portugal and Greece?
Well, I think that is a question that many health experts and also lawmakers are asking themselves. And I think the answer really lies in the fact that in several of those European countries, vaccination rates are not as high as health authorities would like them to be. And also what we are increasingly seeing from the Omicron variant is that there are cases where there is breakthrough infections. In other words, in people getting infected even if they have been vaccinated. Now, all of the science tells us that if you have had your booster booster shot, in other words, 3 doses of your vaccine, the chances of a breakthrough infection are lower. But regardless, a vaccination will keep you safe. It will keep you healthy, and may not, the symptoms may not be as serious as, of course, if you haven't had your vaccination. But this all comes as Europe, of course, records a major spike in cases, which is exactly what the World Health Organization had been worried about. I mean, it's very easy, I think, to get lost in all of the numbers, but the headline number for me this morning that I think we all need to look at is France. 180,000 cases in a single day. Now, to give you context, that is the highest number any European country has seen throughout the entire pandemic. It's an all-time record, of course, for France. Compare that to where I am in Germany. Well, the highest we've ever seen is 65,000. So there's a 100,000 case difference there. Clearly, that is concerning French lawmakers. The health minister there says it's not implausible that we could get to 250,000 cases a day in France in the new year. So the World Health Organization, as well as the European Union now, are really scrambling to make sure that the hospital system can be able to withstand this increasingly large wave from Omicron. But of course, it is a difficult thing to do given it's already winter here, and during this time of year, hospitals are full and very busy, I should say, with other types of illnesses.
Absolutely, indeed. That, of course, is a serious cause of concern, especially what is happening with France, 180,000 cases of infections. But at this point of time, do we know anything about the hospitalization rates in France? And are these people who are getting admitted into hospitals, are they jabbed? And how severe is the infection that they are contracting?
Well, certainly the people that are in intensive care units that are most sick are by and large, by a large majority, it should be said, unvaccinated. And so it really underscores the fact that after 12 months of vaccines being rolled out across Europe, the fact that people in many places have still refused to get their shots is now leading them to a situation where they could get very, very sick in hospital. And because of that, the hospital system is also struggling in many places. Doctors and nurses very exhausted after treating hundreds of thousands of patients across Europe throughout this pandemic. So it is certainly not where Europe wanted to be. I can remember 12 months ago, I was standing outside Berlin's Tegel airport when the first vaccines began to arrive here in Germany. And it was a really exciting, hopeful moment. I think many thought that was our answer out of the pandemic. But given that we are still seeing 20-30% of some populations, including here in Germany, unvaccinated, we are clearly not out of the woods yet. And it does underscore the fact that we really do need to encourage people to not just get vaccinated, but to get their booster and to follow those rules and regulations to help limit the spread, especially of this infectious new variant.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Trent Murray, for joining us from Berlin, getting us all those updates then. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.